Front page of the Standard, tough rules to curb Form 1 selection fraud. Irungu Houghton, where are you going? Impunity. State takes farmer control and crafts stringent rules to stop auctioning of slots, which include school heads posting online open vacancies and ban on admission above the declared Form 1 slots. This is the big story of yesterday, where we had 1.06 candidates. No, there were actually 1.05 candidates at the KCPE. In the year 2018, the Form 1 selection began, and the numbers are out indicating how many will be joining the national schools. We have 31,000 going to the national schools. There are about 103 national schools. Then extra county schools will be admitting 128,000. The county schools 148,000. Sub-county schools 722,000. Then candidates with special needs 1,626, and the total of that is 1,032,000. So there is a difference of about 20,000 who apparently may not have been allocated schools. So the question, no, maybe there are actually some private schools that are not indicated here. So the dream or the vision of the ministry and the government is a 100% transition. And if you look at these numbers, then it would indicate that every candidate that sat this examination finally has a slot to be in Form 1 come January 7th until 11th. But there's still the question of quality, the facilities that are in these schools, yet the Ministry of Education takes the largest share of the national budget. How do we balance this vision, which is quite ambitious, I must say, of 100% transition and the quality of education that candidates are getting in these schools?
Yeah, it's a tough one because, I mean, if I was to use the example of my own constituency, I have about 8 public primary schools. And only 2 secondary schools. So when you're talking 100% transition, I cannot begin to see how that will happen, because to begin with, even the few primary schools that are there will tell you about the teacher-student ratio. It's a tough. I can understand the government's decision about 100% transition, so that no child has to be left out for the simple reason that they did not meet this or that grade. The issue then, I think, for the government is to find out how they can, one, increase the teacher-child ratio, so that in terms of quality, quality does not have to be compromised. Education must be education that has an end in view, which is to imbue the kind of skills and the same sort of standards that they would if they were not doing this. So I think, and the second thing I think we need to be able to note above this is the fact that they've been able to do this in record time. The results have come out, I think, in less than the time that was even a program for them, and before they can go to Christmas, the children are going to be able to know which schools they are going to. But I think in the end, we need to be able to know that quality will not be compromised.
Irungu, just before you respond to that, when the KCPE results were released late last month, 19th of November, we saw quite a number of candidates in public schools. When you compare the performance in those schools vis-a-vis versus the private schools, the private schools had better postings, and this is likely to be repeated at the KCSE level. Well, at the end of the day, the government tells us that it doesn't matter what you score, because every mark has an opportunity, but you cannot ignore the fact that there is better postings at private schools than the public schools. So how do you ensure, even as this says that you improve the teacher-learner ratio, how do you ensure that those candidates are exposed to the same kind of content and presentation, so that it is, after that, it's about the personal abilities and not really the system?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the resourcing matters in this conversation, like everything else. So that if you have a situation where we're leaning into very much an austerity budget context for public facilities, you're going to have this gap between those that are going to public schools and those that are going to private schools widen. We've been looking at this issue, when I say we, in terms of Amnesty International, we've been very concerned concerned about how do we increase the quality of education, particularly around not so much the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s, but more about human rights awareness, ethical training. And I guess the other big threat besides resources is the spike we've seen in teenage pregnancies, which will not end with the category of people. But I think we should probably start by just acknowledging the Ministry of Education for restoring integrity to the examination process. 2-3 years ago, we were really dismayed by the amount of cheating that was happening and just the lack of quality results that we're getting. So they have done very well, not just in terms of the speed, but also in terms of restoring the integrity of that process. But I think the next thing really would look at the conditions within the schools. And I would think not just the issue of quality education, but I think within quality education, there has to be a focus on age-appropriate comprehensive sex education, but so that we don't have dropouts of girls or unwanted motherhood or involuntary motherhood going forward. Something like about 1,000 girls every day, have unprotected sex and get pregnant. And I think that, for me, also is an issue that should not disappear from our headlines as we move into this next round of discussions about education.
All right. And looking at the excerpt on, or rather the report on page 6 of the Daily Nation, you'll see the details of how much school fees is being charged. And I think for the past, yes, page 6 of the Daily Nation, for the past 3 years or so, we have had the school fees for boarding schools capped at 53,554 shillings, and we have that subsidy by the government of 22,244 for all learners in public day secondary schools. And of course, we have had those situations of different schools hiking the fees, or rather giving, what do you call them, the fee structure that is more than 53,000, some of them going all the way to 100,000, and the ministry has always said that this is illegal, but really never seen a crackdown on this. Do you think the schools are justified to charge more than 53,000, and where do we get the solution, bearing in mind that the ministry says 53, the schools are doing different matters?
You see, the problem with secondary schools in this country is their classification, okay? Passing your KCPE is like booking a trip on TripAdvisor. So you pass, you get a better hotel, Alliance, Mangu, Starehe, literally called Starehe, you understand? So the students who go there eat better, they sleep in better accommodation, the windows are replaced, the labs have the right chemicals, so it's balanced. So we cannot, the biggest problem that we have in this country is we have a false equivalence with how we are handling our secondary schools. Our secondary schools are still a class system, okay? They're a class system because if your parents can afford to take you to a better primary school, you'll get better grades and you'll go to Alliance. Right. And then if you fail, you will go to the local DEB secondary school, which has a lab that works once a term. That's when you do all the tests together and you can't touch it yourself because only one person can do the test. So it's not equal. Secondly, the reality is boarding schools are not a good idea if you're going to have 100% transition. Because the best thing about not having a boarding school is at least these kids have a place to sleep. Whether that place is in the middle of Madare or Kibera or in Isiolo, they have a place to sleep. What the government should actually think about is how can they keep these kids staying with their parents and then reducing on the numbers of boarding schools, because that's also how you reduce on fees. And that's also how you reduce, by the way, teenage pregnancy and things like that, because you cannot expect one teacher who is in charge of 40 students to know when a student is having sex or not. But if you have one parent who's taking care of 3 or 4 or 5 children, you will know. So what needs to happen in this educational sector, first, we need to balance it out. And one of the easiest ways to balance it out is to stop having nice accommodation versus bad accommodation and turn all of these things into day schools. That will also force parents to be involved in the child's life, because guess what? You have to see this child. This idea where parents see their children the same way they see their leave days is not sustainable. It does not work. You see, so you cannot be surprised that a parent is surprised when a child is pregnant. You've seen this child for 3 months out of 12 months. So those are the things that we need to solve. So transition to more day schools so that you have more ability to make all these schools equal. So if you went to a district school, or what they're calling a county school now, or you went to a national school, you have the same chances. And then now force parents to be involved in the bringing of their children. Because what are children doing with teachers at night anyway?
Wow, this guy's on a roll today. But of course,
But actually, your point is an interesting one. You know, some parents are actually meeting their children during baby showers.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the point you're making, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the other issue that I would like to have, you give me a minute just to raise the issue of corruption. I think the Ministry of Education have spoken about it. We are losing too much money within our education system and more broadly within the country. We did a survey of Kenyans just before the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is celebrated next week on Monday. And 50% of Kenyans said that they do not believe that the rule of law is being applied equally for two reasons. The first is corruption, and the second is wealth inequality.
Yes.
And it's an obvious finding, but the fact of the matter is that too many of our people do not have access to quality education as a result of the fact that they come from a particular class background, or they come from a particular part of the country, and I think that has to stop.
Okay. All right. You'll get your coffee. Irungu wants you to have coffee.
No, I was thinking actually, he has had too much coffee.
Yeah.
We should put him back on water.
I don't take coffee.
The man will hit the roof.
But he makes a suggestion that we have day schools. I'm just imagining the chaos that will be in this town, bearing in mind that we have traffic issues. There was a ban yesterday. Now you expect your kid to go to...
But you can deal with that issue.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure that teenage pregnancy have something to do with people being in boarding as opposed to day school. And I know parents need to spend more time with their children. I've seen this suggestion by Nat and even Coopet that we need to ban boarding schools for primary. I think we need to really think through that. I don't know whether that's the solution, that banning boarding school. That boarding school has a place and it has a contribution that it has made. I think the issue here is about how much time in terms of teenage pregnancy do we place on parents, and how much responsibility have we thrown to our churches and to the schools. But I don't think that banning just a minute.
About boarding schools. My statement is about parents. An absentee
you started
parent,
by saying
absentee parent is in this country. Look at Facebook today. How many parents are asking, when will schools open so that my kid can go home? How is your own child, 50% your DNA at least, a problem to you? That tells you you are a failure as a parent. You see, we cannot, let me tell you, a parent's core responsibility is to parent. If you export that responsibility to teachers, you're failing. That's just the truth. You cannot run away from it.
Which is fine. The point I'm trying to make is this, and I agree with you on parenting. I'm a parent myself. But it is very possible that you have your children, even now during the holidays, lock them out, no playing outside. But I am telling you, the amount of things that they will do under your watch, unless you're very careful with the internet technology and less regulated, is huge. So that it's really not a question of keep your parents
But haven't you agreed that Wi-Fi is the third parent in every family?
So there's a husband, there's a wife, and Wi-Fi.
And there's Wi-Fi.
Okay, all right. I want us
the second husband or the second wife.
I want us to take a break, but not before reading some feedback that you're receiving from one. Chalo Muia says that commuters said to brave the dangerous Globe Cinema area to Ngara. Those who lost income due to their umpires had a field day mugging pedestrians late in the night. It was more of a security issue more than anything else. Someone else says that where's that comment? Someone says that now the Mararus can access the CBD, but that was just a bad idea. Well, there's someone going at Sonko's newfound accent. No, it's no longer
City. Nairobi City.
It's off market. It's been banned by him because there are no visitors. Then someone's, hey, that's a bad one. I will not read it.
Censor.
Yes. It's important we do not propagate hate. Then Salim Gashe says that all those ideas of decongesting the city and BRT transport system will only succeed if Honorable Oluoch and his ilk stop being selfish. Whoa, you big selfish, I hear.
Was this about Oluoch? I do bicycles sometimes, you know. And then, I walk a lot.
Then Samuel Ria says that the reason why Sonko suspended the ban is because he was caught up in the jam yesterday night and the Kanjo did not collect as much money as they usually do. Well, I don't know whether that's true. Anyway, do stay tuned to Daybreak. You're watching Citizen TV. You can tweet us your views at Citizen TV Kenya Tamgitu kwa Tulis Raburu. The hashtag to use is Daybreak. You may also text us on 22422, and shortly I'll be reading some of your feedback on what you have to say about the topics that we're discussing this morning. And of course, we're back in a moment with more on News Review.